Please, please, listen to me. That's all I ask. I can't take it anymore. I need to tell someone something's happened to me tonight, and I feel so trapped and scared. It's just too much. I'll start at the beginning. I'm sure someone out there, one of you, has heard of Jet Set Radio. It's that game that made the Dreamcast a really popular console for its time. It's known as Jet Grind Radio in some places. You know what I'm talking about? It's a sort of skating, jet skates, and graffiti kind of game. Kind of like a skating simulator, but if you've ever played it, you already know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, so it all started when I bought a Sega Dreamcast from the local flea market for a measly 18 bucks. I thought it was a really great deal at the time. It came with 2 controllers, 1 memory card, and a game. My favorite, in fact. I was surprised as hell to see a working, legitimate copy of Jet Set Radio. As soon as I bought all of the stuff from the friendly Mexican man I talked to, I drove back home excited to relive my favorite, if not one of my favorite Dreamcast games of all time. I had so much sentimental value put into Jet Set Radio, mostly because as a kid, I played it all the time, immersing myself into a world where grinding on rails and jet skates always calmed me down. But, as you'll learn later on, my heart has kind of changed, and I don't really feel the same way anymore. When I got home, I threw the box onto my bed and I hooked the Dreamcast up to the TV. I read on the back of the box that this is a limited edition copy. It came with a special soundtrack disc, the full game, and a special promo video never before seen in regular copies in the full game. I got anxious and I popped in the game inside the Dreamcast. This is officially where things got really weird. The first thing that happened was when I started up the console, the Dreamcast logo came up on the screen like it always does, but it repeated itself, sounding really messed up. Now, I'm not ruling out the possibility that this game could have been hacked or the Dreamcast wasn't working properly, but you know, for something this serious as I'm about to explain later on, who in their right mind would hack a game and console like this in the way that I'm going to describe later on? And I'm also not ruling out the possibility that, the Dreamcast could be glitchy from ages of catching dust. But this doesn't seem like anything a normal console would do, even if slightly damaged. The screen showed the exclusive promo video of the game, the one I'd been dying to see since I read about it on the back cover of the box. The 3 main characters, Beat, Gum, and Tab. You get first in the game were showed skating. They were jumping from building to building with the rest of the crew behind them. Yo-Yo, Garum, Cube, Mew, Piranha, and so on. The whole group was there. They all looked really, really thrilled, happy, elated to be there. Even for video game characters, their faces were all so happy and carefree. It kind of made me smile. They jumped through a billboard that said GG, their group name, and landed on the building, out the other side after tearing through it. I smiled and felt nostalgic. Suddenly, it showed Beat just racing the streets of Shibuya-cho in actual gameplay this time, like the demo in the title screen for the game that you usually see. You know, like how sometimes in the title screen there's always some random AI character playing as a character just for a demo or so. But from behind Beat, as he strolled down the streets of Shibuya-cho, Officer Onishima, the antagonist of the game, who, with the police force, always tries to stop Beat and the GGs from spray painting the town. He chased after him like in the game. He shot his rubber bullets at Beat, and Beat narrowly dodged each one. Just like he always does, if you do it right in the game, that is, but every time he jumped, he sounded happier than usual. The usual sound effect of, yeah, yeah, from him, like always. I wonder what would happen next when, out of nowhere, a bus just suddenly hits Beat in the street, driving him over him, as his bones sickeningly made a sharp snap, loud enough to sound like a surround sound system coming from the TV. I freaked out, startled at this, and dropped the Dreamcast controller on the ground, and for a couple of seconds I sat in my seat frantic, watching the screen, which for some reason went to black. This was only the beginning of the terrible things I'd see, I later learned. I waited for a good 5 minutes, staring at a black screen, randomly mashing buttons on the controller, then something finally came up. It was Beat, on the game over screen. He just laid there, all mangled and twisted in a way that seemed to be beyond repair. Just for this scene, the graphics were in excellent quality and incredibly realistic, like nothing I've ever seen, and that's saying a lot considering I've played a lot of games, a wide range of games, old and new. Beat's head was torn off, only hanging on a loose flap of skin from his neck, the bones on his lower body poking and stabbing out from his body. The top of his head was badly smashed in, parts of his brain spilling out on the ground, probably from the bus tire. Suddenly, the game over screen started to fade out, and again it showed Beat on the street, just laying there, like roadkill. His blood started to spill out everywhere, from his back, from his arms, and out of a still frame shot, it showed the bus, with its tires, being planted on Beat's legs, stuck there, crushing them. Beat started screaming. He started crying in agony, like nothing I've ever seen before. It was terrible. I don't think I've ever seen a video game character cry like that, and I don't think I ever really want to anymore. He sounded like he was really in pain, just excruciating pain, the kind of pain where if you stubbed your toe into like the leg of a chair or something like that. But this was worse. It sounded really bad, just horrible. People started to surround Beat, and Officer Onishima was nowhere to be seen. People just surrounded him and they were just looking at him with their eyes. And these were just the random people that you could see in the background of every single level in Jet Set Radio. They gave him these kind of endearing eyes. The kind of eyes that said, "Oh my god, is he okay?" But no one really did anything. They just stood there, just looking at Beat, and Beat just crying out in pain. This went on for a couple minutes. Just shots of the random passerbyers' faces, Beat crying out in pain. I started to wonder, what was the point of all this? Well, why was I even watching this? It was so sad, so disgusting seeing his body in such a contorted way like that. So I started to press buttons on the controller again, just randomly pressing any button, just hoping to get out of this scene. I didn't want to see this anymore, you know? And Eventually, it went to black again. But this time, as it faded out of black again, it showed Officer Onishima's face. He stood over Beat. It was another still frame shot of just him, just towering over Beat. Onishima looked down at Beat and he just said, "I'm so sorry, Beat. I really didn't mean to hurt you, boy." And he just started to cry. Not like cry, but tears fell out of his eyes. And Beat looked like he couldn't even talk. There was so much blood gushing from his mouth. And his stomach was also bashed in, which I didn't see before. Onishima just gave him these sympathetic eyes. Like he couldn't believe what he just done. But Onishima didn't really do anything. Then suddenly Onishima started raising his voice and saying stuff like, "I'm sorry, Beat. I really didn't mean for that to happen. I didn't know that bus would hit you. I'm so sorry." And he just silently sobbed to himself. But he didn't say anything. He didn't say a word. Then suddenly I could see a red atmosphere just everywhere. Everything just turned so demonically red. The sky didn't look normal at all. It looked like the sky was somehow rendered from a computer that was like separate from the game itself. Onishima continued to sob. Beat started to slowly close his eyes. And for a couple of seconds I knew what was going to happen. And I didn't want to see this anymore. It continued to zoom into Onishima's face. And then it zoomed in into Beat's face. And then it showed his body. And he slowly closed his eyes. As he closed them, slower, Onishima's sobbing started to become even more harsh and worse than before. He dropped his rubber bullet gun, the one he had been shooting at before. And with that, Beat just passed away. The rest of this was just an image of Beat's mangled, destroyed corpse. And more of Onishima's sobbing. I couldn't stand this. I know it sounds like I'm just mumbling here, but it kept on going. The clip didn't stop. I didn't want to see this anymore, so I got up and I tried to press the power button on the Dreamcast, but it wouldn't turn off. I started to panic and I got really scared, because I'd never seen anything like this. I mean, this wasn't a game all of a sudden, this was some kind of sick horror joke. I wondered if this was real, but this wasn't something I was supposed to think about at the time because I just wanted to turn the damn game off. So I went to the cord and I just pulled it out of the electrical socket. But I know this sounds absurd, like incredibly stupid. Like this would never happen in reality. I mean, this shouldn't happen in reality at least. The whole game was still on. I started to panic like crazy. I was just like, how could this happen? This is not physically possible. I mean, this is defying. But I just shoved all that back into my head. I figured out, okay, this game is not going to turn off by itself, so I need to do something about it. So eventually, I got to the point where I started punching the Dreamcast because I just didn't want to see that anymore. It started making me really paranoid. And it never turned off. So I didn't know what else to do. I just stood there in front of the TV just watching this. And eventually I just gave up and sat down and I started pressing random buttons. I guess what this really meant was, if something was controlling the game or something like that, it wanted me to watch. I don't know what for, and I still don't know what for, but I sat there. I pressed more buttons, and the screen faded to black again. Secretly, I was kind of hoping that it would turn off, but it didn't turn off. So I sat there, and the screen came on to a lively city of Shibuya-cho. Shibuya-cho, if you didn't know, is those areas where you play inside the game. You grind on rails, and you skate everywhere, and you avoid cops. But what I saw was, when the camera started going down to the street, and passerbyers were seen, I saw Onishima just walking through the crowd, looking really forlorn. His face, it was apparent that whatever he had done, or so he thought, to cause Beat that kind of grief, that kind of death, it looked like he really thought this was his fault. He walked through the crowd, no one even paying him attention. No one looked at him. He just held his head down, walking in silence. Also, another thing to note about this was there was no sound. No sound at all in this clip. There was just no sound. Silent. Just so silent. It's maddening. He kept walking and walking and walking and walking and walking until he finally stopped at the end of like an intersection or something. I couldn't really tell because the camera was kind of pointed at him. But as he just stood there, now immobile, he held his head up and he just started screaming, shouting, just screaming everywhere in the air. Like he's never screamed before. And these screams were so realistic, I swear, it's just... I couldn't... Oh my god, I didn't want to listen to this. It scared me. It made me really scared, uncomfortable almost. And I thought this was going to go on for a while, but it stopped. And it cut to black again. The next scene was Gum. I thought this was really odd because, you know, I thought Gum would be in this, but I guess she is. I started to realize what exactly she was at. She was inside what appeared to be the GG Hangout. In that player select screen, whenever you go out on a level, whenever you choose a character, there's some kind of background that all the characters are at. And she was there in the GG Hangout. And she was just sitting on the couch. It looked like the TV was on in front of her. Again, the graphics are really amazing. Amazing, like realistic. It kind of reminded me of something like hyper-realistic, I guess. I don't really know how to describe it exactly. I really don't, because it's really hard to describe this whole thing, much less describe the graphics, right? She was only just sitting around. The TV seemed to be on, like I said. And she turned off the TV all of a sudden. Sat there, as if thinking to herself. I wondered where the others were. Garum, Yo-Yo, Piranha, Combo, Cube. All the other characters in the game. I mean, it wasn't just Beat, right? Gum was looking lonely. Lonely like crazy. She got up, and she moved out of the camera, kind of off screen for a couple seconds. When she came back, she was wearing some sort of school uniform. One of those, Japanese ones, where Japanese schoolgirls go to school wearing those, short skirts and all that. She began to walk outside from what it seemed like, because I couldn't really see it as it was off screen. And as she walked, it looked like it was being fast-forwarded. It showed a camera shot of her walking down the street, in the busy street of Shibuya-cho. And she kept walking and walking and walking, but it was fast-forwarded, so it didn't really take that long. Then, she was back inside the GG hangout again. This repeated on for 3 more times. A continuation of her walking to wherever it was, and back to GG hangout. 3 more times of this. I sat there and watched. When she came back, the 3rd or 4th time I believe, she sat down again, and she said, "Beat," and was silent for a while, I guess. Then I started to hear some audio. It was kind of off sync, meaning it didn't really match her lips. But maybe that's what made it so creepy, I guess. She bawled, just cried, started sobbing softly to herself. I didn't think it was possible for another character to cry all of a sudden. I didn't really see the point in this. And every now and then, in between her sobs, she'd say, The screen cut to something else. It cut to Tab just skating down the sidewalks of Shibuya-cho. He went down an alleyway somewhere. A dark alleyway. The camera stayed still as it showed him from behind. I could hear some sort of sobbing. And out of nowhere, I saw Onishima walk into the alleyway from behind. He started to get more distant from the camera as he walked down the same alleyway that Tab was apparently in. When he got into the hallway, all the way down inside, no, not the hallway, I mean the alleyway, he found Tab. And it sounded disgusting. It sounded like he was molesting him. He started to cry out, and this wasn't crying like crying. It was like Tab was in distress, like someone was struggling with him. And I figured it must be Onishima. After a while, his shouts and his various groans and his distress started to become a full-fledged wail. I saw him fall to the ground from behind a wall somewhere, I guess. And he said, "Don't touch me." Onishima pulled him back in. I could see his arms just pulling him in. Tab began to cry even harder now. Then the screen cut back to Gum, who was still crying. And the last thing I saw after that was Gum walking down what appeared to be a school of some sorts. I could kind of tell it was a school because there was a big tower in the middle, but it looked like somewhere familiar from Jet Set Radio. I can't remember what the level was from, but it was hardly ever used, I remember that. It wasn't the place you skated, it was just a place you passed by. I saw Gum just walking. And this is kind of rare because, since when did anyone ever walk in Jet Set Radio? Any of the main characters, at least. She walked down the pathway towards the school in absolute silence. The screen cut to black. Again. But text appeared on the screen. Some words. "Do you remember Jet Set Radio?" it said. Just when I thought it was over. Just when I thought everything was done, the screen had faded to black once again. Gum was just on the screen again, and she was crying in a full-out sob. And it didn't stop, and it was way too loud this time. The volume was higher than before, and I couldn't stop it. She just kept crying, and it frightened me. It really scared me. I tried to turn the Dreamcast off. I kicked it, I punched it, I sat on it, I did everything I could just to make sure this thing would turn off, but it would not turn off. And I didn't see how it was possible. Like I said, I turned the game off, I took the cord out, but it didn't turn off. So I just ripped it out, all the wires from it, and I threw it down the stairs. And it finally stopped. The screen was gone. The screen had it turned off by itself. The TV was off. I pressed the power button on the TV, but it wouldn't turn on anymore. It seemed like it fucked up the TV pretty bad. This didn't seem like some kind of hack some guy would put inside a video game. And then I went back to the stairs and looked down at where I threw the Dreamcast at. I didn't want to touch that thing anymore. So I took the Dreamcast. I dragged it off somewhere and buried it. I went back home that night, right after I had buried it. I went to my room, but I felt really scared. I kept hearing Gum's frightened little sobbing. I had images of Beat being run over in my head. I couldn't sleep. And I just woke up right now to record this, because even as we're speaking right now, I feel like something is watching me. And I still have those words inside my head. I still have the words. Do you remember Jet Set Radio?